Miss Simonson, and this is Midnight Howl by Claire Hutton and published by Scholastic. We're going to continue on where we left off on chapter 13. Here we go. The next week flew by with normal school stuff, homework, gym, quizzes, lunch. And then, when it was the week of the camping trip, we were leaving after school on a Friday, and there was a lot to do. At home, Jack had roped Haley and me into being his kitchen assistants. Haley had decided to come on the trip. Yay! And at school, Lily wanted me to go over a million details of organizing the trip with her. Here's what the week looked like. Monday. During lunch, I met Lily in science classroom to help her check over the assignments for the trip. She had checks from everyone who was going on, notes on supplies, reservations, and numbers to call. Wow. She was going over everything so fiercely that her normal smooth hair had escaped from its headband. Little strands standing up in the air and giving her a wild look. Tense, she said to me with strained intensity. Sleeping bags. The teachers are driving most people in minivans, and parents are bringing pickups with more kids and all the stuff to drop off. We have to remind everyone to bring extra warm sleeping clothes. Definitely, I said. It was still light jacket weather during the day, but it was starting to dip down towards freezing at night. Do you have a plan? Do you have to plan this all yourself? What about Mr. Samuels? Lily shrugged. He'll check up on what I decide, but I want everything right. She tapped a pencil against her desk and went on. Water, toilet paper. How much water did 30 people need for a 2-night stay? Back up, I said, alarmed. I thought there were showers and bathrooms and a camp store and things. Isn't this a regular, public campsite? Sure, said Lily, but not in October. After the summer, there's only primitive camping. Everything's closed up. There are pit toilets, but that's all. I didn't know what a pit toilet was, but I could make a pretty good guess. Yuck. Lily jumped to her feet. No, she said, don't look like that. It's going to be awesome. Awesome, I said, doubtfully. Awesomely, she said. She spread her arms wide, giving me a joyous smile. Picture it, she went on. A starry night, the campfire burning, the smell of smoke and wood in the air, the quiet movements of tiny animals, and us surrounded by the universe. Wow, I said. I never thought about it that way before. I hadn't realized that Lily was the type to get all poetic about going outdoors. She'd always struck me as a very down-to-earth girl. Anyways, she said, I just want everyone to have a good time. We will, I said firmly. It's only 2 nights, I thought. Who needs running water? I smiled encouragingly at Lily. I'll get online and see if I can figure out how much water the average person needs to use every day, I offered. Piece of cake. Tuesday. Taste this, Jack demanded. Something smelled good, like roasting nuts. Haley looked up, keeping her finger in a book to mark her place. Jack, she says, we've got a math quiz tomorrow. We don't have time to taste test for you. Taste it, Jack said again, frowning at his sister. He thrust a spoonful of what looked like grains and nuts at her, and she tried it. Not bad, she admitted. I like the honey. What is it? I asked. My special granola, Jack said proudly. I'm getting ready for the trip. Taste! I tried some. It was good. Warm and sweet and chewy. Still, wouldn't it just be easier to take a box of cereal? I asked. Cereal from a box? Horrible, Jack said. Then he bared his teeth and actually growled at me. For a moment, his face was really scary. His eyes were slits and his hair was bristling. Horrible! Maniac, Haley said affectionately. Then she turned to look at me. Marisol, she asked, a worried note in her face. You look freaked out. Are you okay? Sure, I said, but suddenly it hit me. If Haley was a werewolf, then what is Jack? Because they're twins. The werewolf book said whole families were suspected of being werewolves, and that the families had disappeared together. They would have retreated to the woods. Was it possible that if Haley were a werewolf, then the rest of her family were too? It was hard to picture Molly and Mike as werewolves. They had definitely been around downstairs, fully human, until late night of the full moon, so they must be human. Plus, I figured my mom would have noticed if Molly were a werewolf during the 4 years that they lived together in college. But Molly had said her family was one of those driven from the town for being werewolves, hadn't she? No, it was a ridiculous idea. Still, I remembered my friend Olivia back home. Both her parents had dark brown hair and dark eyes, but Olivia was blonde and green-eyed. Just like me, I have green eyes. Not blonde hair. People ask sometimes if she was adopted, but she wasn't. She just inherited her grandmother's coloring. Could being a werewolf be a recessive gene that skipped Molly? Marisol, Haley asked again. She and Jack were both staring at me, and I gave them a shaky smile. Oh, I'm fine, I said, as brightly as I could manage. Suddenly, I was glad we'd been back from the camping trip before the full moon. Wednesday. After school, I stayed late at the library. Can I help you get started? The librarian asked when I took an unoccupied computer. No thanks, I said. I know what I'm doing. I didn't want anyone to see what I was about to look up. Once she left and I was sure no one was watching, I typed genetic werewolf into the search engine. Nothing useful came up. I typed becoming a werewolf and clicked through the most promising links. One was clearly part of a role-playing game, a couple were movie reviews, and one was exactly what I was looking for. Yes, ways of becoming a werewolf, it said. And it detailed different ways legend said people have become werewolves. It wasn't just getting bitten. If you wanted to be a werewolf, you could drink dew from a wolf's footprint. Ill. You could eat a wolf's brain. Ill, double ill. Make a magic lotion to rub on yourself. Weird. Or wear a special flower. Lame. You could also become a werewolf by being bitten or as the result of a family curse. I grinned as I pictured Jack and Haley mixing up the magic lotion instead of Jack's special granola. But a family curse fit in with Molly's being descended from one of the original families of Wolf Valley. The site also confirmed my thoughts about the fact that becoming a werewolf could be a recessive trait. It said, even if you are born into a werewolf family, only some children will inherit the gene, and it may skip multiple generations, only to pop up unexpectedly. So Jack and Haley could be werewolves even if Molly wasn't. She could have carried the gene and passed it down to them unknowingly. Or Jack didn't have to be a werewolf even if Haley was. They weren't identical twins after all. They had different genes. I had to admit to myself that while I didn't want Haley to be a werewolf, I really didn't want Jack to be one. I pictured his friendly blue eyes, his bright smile. He was just too sunny, like in the nicest way, to be a creature of the night. Still, I thought I should probably keep an eye on both of them. Thursday, Haley and I helped Jack pack his food into coolers. And I was so busy getting ready for the trip, I hardly thought about the wolves or werewolves at all. But that night, I dreamed. Let me get some water before we start this dream. That night I dreamed. Here's the dream. I was outside the house in the dark. Everything was calm. I could hear the horses whining softly in their stalls, the leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. It was cold and the stars shone brightly. I could see the wolf constellation Lupus right above me. Nothing was wrong, But I was terrified. I knew something was coming. And then, suddenly, I knew it was there. The normal night sounds around me stopped, and there was silence. I could feel the wolf watching me. I turned, scanning the trees and the bushes around the house, trying to find the animal whose gaze I could feel so clearly. Nothing. Suddenly, a twig snapped sharply, and I screamed! And then, of course, she woke up. I woke up with my mouth dry with horror. My heart was still pounding. The dream had been pretty bland. Nothing actually happened other than the twig snapping. But I'd been so terrified, and in the dream, I knew why. It was because the wolf was coming, and there was no way I could escape it. Friday! Friday, it seemed like hardly anyone could concentrate in class. When that final bell rang, we met in the science lab. 25 kids, chaperones, duffel bags, tents, backpacks, coolers of food, water, and sleeping bags. Anderson was practically vibrating with excitement. He pulled a frisbee out of his backpack and flung it at random. Someone caught it, and soon it was flying all over the room. "We're going to a party in the woods," he shouted. I glanced over at Mr. Samuels, who was so deep in conversation with Lily, he didn't even notice. But Haley caught my eye. She was loaded down on a cooler with foil-wrapped packages sitting on top. I made my way through the crowded room to her and took some of the stuff off the top. "Thanks," she said. "Should I ask?" I said, nodding towards the packages. "Food, of course," she said. "You should see what Jack left in the truck." She looked around the room, which was now full of yelling, jumping, and a million different intense conversations. Someone had pulled out a tennis ball and was bouncing it off the wall. "Do you think we'll be going anytime soon?" Haley asked wistfully. "This stuff is getting pretty heavy." Surely a werewolf would be super strong, I thought. 1 point for Haley being a regular person. I tried to shake off the thought. Dreams or no dreams, this wasn't something to obsess about this weekend. I was gonna have fun. Lily hopped off a chair and stuck 2 fingers in her mouth and gave a loud whistle. She reached out and caught the frisbee, then glanced at the boy with the ball until he caught it and stuck it back in his backpack. "Okay," she announced. "Let's hit the road." Everybody cheered as she smiled. "Listen up to your van assignments," she went on, and everyone settled down immediately. I looked at her admiringly. Lily could get a whole group of excited kids to do what she wants without even yelling at them. Assignments were given out, and we packed up our bags and tents and everything else. And at last, we were off. Off to chapter 14 next.